もしやコスモでは。
Cosmo makes me feel.
Cosmo AP Luxury Sports.
Before we begin, I would like to extend a sincere thank you to all of those who supported me after this place was broken into. The positive comments on YouTube, via private messages, and even offline for those who ran into me at events were just instrumental in keeping a reasonably positive attitude throughout this entire process. Speaking of which, it took about a month to get back into operation here. 2 weeks off work, cleaning this place up, installing a security system, cameras, window bars, more deadbolts, etc., etc. And then another 2 weeks with the rest of my life on hold, just sorting everything else out. Through this process, I think that I have learned a few important lessons. 1, people suck. 2, secure your stuff. 3, some people don't suck. Indeed, the outpouring of support and to hear from other people that they have gone through the same thing was very encouraging and really kind of helped me get through this and just, push forward. 4, I could certainly make a living as a security system installer. And 5, as much as I try to go it alone, you know what, sometimes you just have to ask people for help. And the surprising thing is, well, they will help, which is pretty awesome and goes back to number 3, those people who don't suck. And finally, 6, the show must go on. It's part 43 of my 76 Mazda Cosmo restoration, and yep, this time, bumpers. Got to at least put the nose back on the car in order to start fitting the bumpers, but yep, just as I thought. I knew when I was mounting the heat exchanger for the intercooler that it would interfere with this flange on the nose of the car, so I expected I would have to make an adjustment. Now this is the kind of thing that could take hours to line up. I just have to get it good enough in order to fit the bumpers. Now, based on the location of some of the witness marks of these bolt holes, it really didn't even fit that well from the factory. This stupid thing weighs a ton. Easily, I don't know, 60 pounds? Well, there's your problem. This thing sticks out about 3 3/4 inches at the ends, damn near 5 inches in the middle, and has about 1 3/4 inch clearance to the fender. Now the reason you'll find aesthetic abortion bumpers like these in vehicles from the mid-70s to the mid-80s is because in the US there was a federally mandated 5 mile/hour crash capability, basically saying that cars had to sustain a 5 mile/hour hit without damage. So what did they do? They took the big ass chrome bumpers, stuck some big ass rubber Dagmars on them, and then put in pneumatic pistons to allow that bumper to move in several inches to absorb the crash. Of course, it looks like rancid ass. Now, the car does have this filler piece, but even with it installed, close enough. Even with it installed, the bumper still sticks out like 6 inches, so it only looks like slightly less unfresh bump. Holy long screw. Of course, that's what she said. Yeah, these will get some LEDs. Someone used a stupid 7/16 inch bolt instead of a 10mm on this. Here's about 40 pounds off that bumper. And of course, I'm going to get rid of these ridiculous rubber Dagmars. Yeah, oh, they just kind of popped right off. Now, yes, I know these aren't really Dagmars, but they're not bumperettes either, and I don't know what to call them other than the large, ugly rubber things, so I'm going to call them Dagmars. Well, I put some of the nose parts back on the car to make sure that there's no interference, and obviously to check how it looks. Now, basically, this is sort of what I'm going for. Tucking the bumper only a few inches from the body. Now, I spent over an hour looking at it, and from a sticky out perspective, I think it looks best if it's an inch past the nose of the car. Now, also, I'm going to have to shorten these overhangs so that they're roughly even with the indent of the body and tuck everything closer to the fenders. Before I do any of that, however, there's a dent right here. I don't know if you can see it very well on camera. Oh, now you can. So I guess I'll hit it with a hammer until it's straight. The metal really wants to go back to where it was. I'm not trying to bash it into place. I'm just trying to encourage it into place. Okay, and just some metal spacers to take up the vertical height. Yeah, that's pretty good for height. A little over an inch from the front grille seems about right. Well, after at least an hour of staring, a bathroom break, Google image searching hot rod bumpers, I think this is about where I want the bumper. It gives that modern fascia experience, but also sticks the bumper out just a little bit from the grille so that it still looks a bit like an old car. Now, I guess the next task is to modify these 200-pound mounts to put this bumper there. Now this whole bumper piston mechanism has to go away because With the bumpers as close to the car as they will be, they're not so much for bumping anymore as they are for aesthetics. Interesting bit of trivia. This mount has obviously been broken and poorly welded at some point. It's almost like they didn't want these to come out. Victory! Oh, that's much better. The bumper mount with the sketchy stick welding is the right-hand side mount. And as you recall, I fixed a dent on the right-hand side of the bumper. Coincidence? Probably. Just straighten this out as much as I can. I mean, I'm going to be cutting it up anyway, so I don't think it matters that it's bent. I cut a lot of the terrible welding off the mount and bolted it back onto the car, and none of the holes line up. So maybe I can just tweak it a hair and then re-weld it. In there. Just that's not bad. I'd say that'll work. And again, I spent the better part of an hour and a half lining this thing up to where I wanted it. What I've decided is to use this piece of, I don't know, 3/4 inch tubing as a spacer, which evens out the front, and then simply evened out the wings by measuring each side. What I really should have done is put these bumper brackets back on before I spent that better part of an hour and a half lining up the bumper, because this really sucks. Now obviously with the bumper repositioned, none of the stock bracketry is going to work. And I just want to measure and figure out how long I have to extend the stock bumper bracket. Yeah, let's call it 4.5 inches. 4.5. Damn it. We'll need a set of flanges to go between the bracket and the bumper. So this is 2-inch tubing. Let's say, give it 1 extra inch on each side. So let's say 4 inches wide. Now the reason I welded those together is so that I effectively only have to drill all of my holes once, because it'll just go through both flanges when I do.
The inner bumper side of the flange is going to be basically the same, just a little bit different in dimensions. It looks like the inside will fit just under 5 inches, which is what she said.
I made a second set of flanges just a little bit bigger than the first and taped some nuts to the back. Now in order to stabilize this whole mess so I can bring it over to the bench, I'm going to weld some rods between the bumper skin and the factory bumper mounts. This is going to be awkward. Can't see if the mask is down. Damn. Got a few more of those to do, and then the whole thing should come right off. Should be able to carefully wiggle this whole assembly free now. Cool. Now the idea of this whole mess is that this piece of tubing extends the bumper bracket, and then one side of the flange matches the bumper, the other side welds to the bracket. It's going to take some grinding to fit this flange. This sits pretty well on here. It's positioned just perfectly. Well, it's going to need some trimming. Well, after about 11 billion trips to the grinder and the saw, this fits with a little bit of clearance on the bottom. And now just tack weld it into place.
guess before I burn these mounts in permanently, I should make sure it still fits on the car. Kind of tight, but tight's better than loose. Which is what he said. Well, everything still fits on the car, so let's metal glue this permanently. To cut down on the warpage when I weld the flange, just clamping it to this piece of 1/2-inch steel, that should stop it from moving for the most part. Well, that's going to take a little while to cool, so while that's happening, I'll swap the wire in the welder with some 023 and then tackle the bumper side. Bit of a gap to fill here. Oops. Since I have the welder all set up already to weld this thickness of metal, you know, all of these holes are really starting to bug me. They need to go away. Oh, there are a lot of holes in this damn thing. You know, the best part about this is that there's no real way to clamp it in place. It's just such an odd shape. You know, I really should be using like a copper backing plate to make this easier. And of course, after about 10 minutes of welding, I probably now have about 2 hours of grinding. Well, after all that, see if she still fits on the car. Well, even after all that welding and grinding and metal warpage, looks like it still fits. And it's basically in the same spot as when I started. Now that already looks a metric crap ton better. But there's this weird upsweeping body line here that kind of clashes with the bumper. Plus, this overhang is ridiculous. So I think I'm probably going to shorten this up. Just take 1.25 inches
right out of here. Let's move that in. The flattest point of this protrusion seems to be right about there. This is a 3/4 inch wide electrical tape. So we'll just wrap that around, trying not to stretch it. But I actually want to shorten it by 1.25 inches. So I need to measure another 1/2 inch. And I'll probably do that in several points just to make sure. Piece of tape with the marks I just made. There really is no decent way to clamp this thing. Well, considering how much I chopped out of this, it lines up remarkably well. It looks like the only reshaping I'll have to do is right here. Cool. Safety squint. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to try this on the car. Yep, I would say that's exactly what I'm looking for, so I guess I got to do the other side exactly the same. Yep, still fits. Side looks pretty good. I tossed a few more tacks on here just to solidify it a bit because I have to kind of manipulate this metal a bit so that it lines up smoothly. This side, unfortunately, doesn't line up nearly as well. Bad. There we go. And quite a bit of adjustment needed here. Try to bend it a bit at the curve. There we are. That's good. And now we can burn it in. Even though this is pretty thick, I still want to move around to avoid the warpage. course, after the welding, there's the grinding. Done. The inside doesn't have to be as nice. Now I quite like how this sits on the car, but sight right down the bumper. See that little hump right there? This side is stamped a little bit differently than that side. So I just want to take that out. I think that all I have to do is make a cut where the peak is, and then like fold it down and weld it shut again. The wheel's a little thick. In stock form, the marker and signal light assembly mounts to the inner bumper structure and the lens on top of that. Of course, now this entire inner structure goes into the scrap pile. Plus, Mazda mounted the lenses go about that far into the bumper, which looks like crap. So what I'm going to do is pull the tail light brackets off of this, and we'll mount the lenses much closer to the level of the bumper. Well, I think that's a good spot to leave it. It's been a while since I've released a video, so let's get this one out as part 1, and stay tuned for part 2 when the bumper will be finished. Now, not going to make a big deal out of it, but started a Patreon. Honestly, a lot of people suggested it, and I thought, hey, why not, you know? So put the link on the screen right now, and one of the neat things you will get if you support me via Patreon is early access to all the episodes, including the part 2 of this, which, little hint, is really close to being ready.